Greetings, YouTube. Today I'm going to talk about the Pathfinder Role-Playing Games Game Mastery Guide. I'm going to do a quick rundown of what's in the contents of the book, and then I'm going to get to the 3 questions that I asked myself when I purchased this and see if they were answered. Okay, so we have Getting Started, which is the duties of a GM, Tone of Maturity, the GM as host, Rules of the House, Preparing to Run a Game, and Creating a Campaign Guide. Second chapter, Running a Game, How to Run a Game, The Art of GMing, The Science of GMing, GM Considerations, Tools for Game Masters. Chapter 3, Player Characters, Starting Character, New Players, The Life of a Party, Player Interactions. Chapter 4, Non-Player Characters, Cast of Characters, Making an NPC Unique, Life of the NPC, NPC Boons, Villains, and NPC Creators Toolbox. Chapter 5, Rewards. The role of rewards, starting treasure, what is a reward, PCs controlling rewards, random item generators. Chapter 6, Creating a World. World building, detailing your world, geography, cultural considerations, the primitive society, the feudal society, the rural/agrarian society, the cosmopolitan society, other societies, technology, time, the cosmos, the planes, and parallel worlds. Chapter 7, Adventures, elements of adventure, dungeons, planar, taverns, urban, water, wilderness. And Chapter 8, Advanced Topics, customizing your game, chases, disasters, drugs and addiction, fortune-telling, gambling and games of chance, haunts, hazards, mysteries, investigations, puzzles, riddles, sanity and madness. And the last chapter is the NPC gallery. And then there's an index in the back. So, the 3 questions I had posed myself before I purchased this book was, is this book useful for starting GMs? Is this book useful for GMs who have some experience? And can this book be used at all by someone that is not using the Pathfinder or the 3.5 set of rules? Because it's ideally meant for a Pathfinder game, but you could use it in 3.5 with, on the fly. There would be not to be any severe modifications to what's in this book. So, the first question, is this book useful to people who are just starting out as a game master? And the answer to that question is yes. I would in fact say that this book is indispensable in that regard. In fact, if you were going to run a Pathfinder game, and I recommend that system, I would recommend the Pathfinder book, the main book, the monster manual, the creature guide, and this as your third purchase. Because if you have those books, you're going to be able to start a campaign, and then you can branch out into other publications at a later date to flesh things in that you think are lacking. But this book is going to give you the groundwork. It's going to tell you what you're going to need to do before you game, what you might encounter as far as problems and issues, how to handle them, how to set up adventures, how to design functional information about societies. I particularly like the section they did on primitive societies. I thought that was well done. Because most fantasy games are going to take place in a kind of an agrarian, feudal kind of situation. Maybe some cosmopolitan, big city stuff. Maybe some primitive stuff. But that sweet spot is that feudal agrarian section right in there, and they cover that here. So again, if you're only going to buy 3 Pathfinder books, this would be number 3 to my mind. I hear that the Advanced Player's Guide is excellent. I have not had a chance to buy it yet. I cannot pick it up until after my wife has a job. So hopefully in the near future I'll be able to get one and get to reading it, because I'm really looking forward to it. Because this book here is mostly fluff, doesn't have a lot of crunch, and I do love the crunch, and the Advanced Player's Guide is full of it. The second question, is this book useful to the experienced GM? And again, I would say yes. Not as much as the inexperienced GM. This is not an indispensable book for an experienced GM. But it does have a lot of decent advice, but more importantly, it's got a lot of random charts in here that would make creating things, particularly when you've got a mental block, when you're stymied, you can't think of something, you're just kind of like staring at that blank piece of notepaper like, what am I gonna do? These charts in here, rolling on them, are gonna help get you thinking, even if you don't do what the results are in the random result. It's going to get you moving, and that's important. Because once you're moving, you're all set. And the NPC chapter in here, chapter number 9, is incredibly good. They'll have like tavern, and then a listing of all the people that could be in the tavern. They also have just generic, like generic this and generic that you could pluck out easily and dump anywhere. There's just so many useful NPCs, and I'm looking at the NPCs and I was reading them, and I'm coming up with ideas, one after another, just ideas for characters, ideas for ideas, thinking, okay, how would I tweak this if I were going to run, like the quintessential tavern? What would I do a little differently here and there? So I would be a useful book to experienced GMs, not necessarily the must-have third book for the Pathfinder line. You may want to get the campaign guide, or maybe some of their adventure lines, but I still think that this would be worth your time if you decide to get it down the line. And the last question is it useful at all to people who are not playing Pathfinder or 3.5? Well, as I said, a lot of this book is fluff. All those charts in there I just mentioned, all the random stuff, all of them are fluff. They're just entries with little descriptions. So you could definitely... hold on a second. Okay, I have a cat behind me doing something potentially stupid. If you hear a crash in a minute, you'll know why. So I think that it could still be useful, but you're going to bump this down. I'd be investing money in books for the game that you prefer. But if you're looking for some inspiration outside the gaming system that you're running, this may help you. Particularly if your group is very much into core collecting that game system, and they may not think to pick up a Pathfinder book, so this may give you an advantage that you can come up with some ideas that maybe they're not going to know about, kind of something that you can come at them from left field. This may be something you want to invest in. So I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good book. I definitely recommend it to anyone out there who is a player of Pathfinder or the 3.5 system. And I still think it has some utility for those who are into just, more varied versions of the fantasy genre, because I don't think this is going to apply to anything beyond the fantasy genre. It's really aimed at the fantasy genre, even though that is a really broad category. It wouldn't be useful for other genres, in my opinion, but it still would be good for that genre. So, if any of these categories suit you, go get a copy.